Somewhere in a testing lab right now, a small batch of black rectangular boxes is being put through thermal stress tests, HDMI handshake simulations, and wireless interference chambers. None of them have a retail box yet. None of them have a price sticker. But according to a growing wave of supply chain leaks, these boxes represent the most significant streaming hardware jump in years, and the people closest to the manufacturing pipeline are calling it the Apple TV Ultra. If you've used a modern streaming box for more than a few months, you already know the pain points. You hit play, and the screen goes black for a few seconds before the picture returns. You're deep into a movie, and the surround sound just cuts out for a split second, like the box forgot what it was doing. You switch from one streaming app to another, and suddenly the volume is either whisper quiet or blowing out your speakers. These aren't rare glitches. They're baked into how current generation streaming hardware handles the handoff between video, audio, and your TV's own processing. And according to leakers tracking supply chain activity, the next generation of hardware was built specifically to attack these exact problems. Let's start with why these glitches happen in the first place, because understanding the cause makes it a lot easier to understand what actually gets fixed and what doesn't. Every time your streaming box sends a signal to your television, it's not just sending video. It's sending video resolution data, frame rate data, dynamic range information like HDR or Dolby Vision, and multi-channel audio, all bundled together over a single HDMI cable. Whenever any one of those things changes, like switching from a menu screen to a movie or jumping between standard content and Dolby Vision content, the box and the TV have to renegotiate the entire connection. That renegotiation is where almost every annoying glitch comes from. The black screen flash, the audio dropout, the brief freeze. It's not a defect. It's a structural limitation of how much a single cable and a single processor can juggle at once. This is where the rumored jump to a 3nm chipset becomes such a big deal. Leakers have pointed to a chip in the same performance class as Apple's most advanced mobile silicon, which would represent a massive leap in raw processing headroom compared to what's currently powering these boxes. More processing power sounds like a vague spec bump until you realize what it actually means in practice. Those constant background synchronization checks between audio and video streams take real computational time. On weaker chips, that time is long enough for you to notice a stutter here, a dropout there. On a chip with drastically more overhead, those checks can complete before your ears or eyes catch anything wrong. The audio dropouts that have plagued dialogue-heavy scenes and dense action sequences are one of the clearest candidates for a real fix. Not because the software changed, but because the hardware finally has enough spare capacity to keep the pipeline stable. Now, before you get too excited, it's worth being honest about what raw processing power cannot fix. Audio-to-video sync issues, where the sound trails slightly behind what's happening on screen, are not actually caused by the streaming box in most cases. They're caused by your television. Modern OLED and QLED panels run extremely heavy image processing to smooth motion, enhance contrast, and clean up compression artifacts, and all of that processing takes time to compute. Meanwhile, the audio signal usually passes through with minimal delay. That mismatch is what creates the lag you notice. No streaming box chip, no matter how powerful, can override your television's internal processing pipeline. If you're dealing with that kind of delay, the fix has always been and will likely remain buried in your TV's audio delay or lip sync settings, not in whatever box you plug into it. Then there's the audio format debate, which has been a sore point for home theater enthusiasts for years. A lot of serious setups rely on receivers that can decode audio formats independently, letting the receiver do the heavy lifting instead of the streaming box. The complaint has always been the lack of full bitstream pass-through support for certain surround formats outside Apple's preferred ecosystem. According to current leaks, this isn't expected to change with the next generation of hardware. This isn't a hardware limitation at all. It's a business and licensing decision, and faster silicon doesn't change licensing agreements. If your home theater setup depends on formats outside the manufacturer's preferred audio ecosystem, that limitation appears likely to carry over regardless of how advanced the chip inside the box becomes. Where things look more promising is in the frustrating case of surround sound randomly downgrading to basic stereo mid-movie. This particular glitch tends to come from a failed handshake over the audio return channel connection between your box, your receiver, and your TV. It's essentially a communication breakdown, not a raw power issue, and that's exactly the kind of problem you can fix with software refinement. Leaks around the next operating system update suggest deep changes specifically targeting how these HDMI communication protocols behave, which would directly address this kind of random downgrade. If accurate, that means fewer moments where you're 2 minutes into an action scene and suddenly everything sounds like it's coming out of a laptop speaker. The black screen flash deserves its own mention because it's probably the most universally recognized annoyance across every streaming platform, not just one brand. That flash happens because your box and TV are renegotiating resolution and dynamic range settings every time you start new content. It's not going away entirely because it's tied to HDMI standards that every device has to follow, not just a single manufacturer's choice. But a dramatically faster processor should be able to compress that renegotiation window down from a multi-second blackout to something closer to an instant blink you barely register. That's not a total fix, but for anyone who's sat through an awkward 3-second void every single time they hit play, shaving that down to almost nothing would still feel like a massive quality of life improvement. One consistent complaint that reportedly will not be solved by any hardware upgrade is inconsistent volume levels between different streaming apps.